Good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 4th. It is 9:01 a.m. This is the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. This morning, we have Ashley Doyle from the State Treasurer's Office. Thank you for being here with us.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, for the record, Ashlyn Doyon. I'm the Director of Policy from the State Treasurer's Office, and I am just logging on to your Zoom as we speak to share my screen. We'll see here. Oh, there we go. Get my screen up. And I have a brief presentation for you. I think the chair asked me to come in and do sort of an overview of the treasurer's office quickly. I know that there are a lot of new committee members, and so I'm going to just sort of breeze through all of the sort of various topics that our office does, and then I'll hone in on some of the programs that are most pertinent to this committee. But please feel free to ask me questions about whatever topics interest you that are in our purview. So this is an organizational chart for the Treasurer's Office. We have sort of what I would say are four primary departments. We have the Treasury Operations Division, which is what you think of when you think Treasurer's Office. That's sort of the central banking division of state government. We also do the state's debt management, capital bonding exercises in the Treasury Operations Division. We have the retirement division, which is where we manage the three large state public pension programs for state, municipal, and teachers. And then we also have the unclaimed property division. A couple of years ago, we passed a 109-page bill that this committee worked on extensively to revise the state's unclaimed property statutes. Unclaimed property is sort of missing financial property of sorts. It can be uncashed checks, forgotten about bank accounts, et cetera, that get escheated to the state, that the state then has the responsibility to hold and attempt to reunite with the proper consumer. And so then we have the fourth division in the treasurer's office, which is kind of our administrative branch. It's where we have our communications team, myself, the policy arm, and we also have sort of a newly stood up division of economic empowerment that kind of sits within that administrative team right now. It's just one director. But in that division, we house our Vermont Saves public retirement program. We house sort of other financial literacy and education programs and initiatives. It's where we're doing the medical debt work that you've seen the treasurer be in the news about. It's where we hope that baby bonds will one day be housed. So sort of the lay of the land there, and then we'll get into some quick facts about each of the divisions. So as I already mentioned, in treasury operations, we handle debt management and the issuing of all of the state bonds that are approved by the General Assembly. We also do the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee and the debt authorization process, which is a biannual process that determines how much net tax supported debt is prudent for the state to issue year over year. We maintain the state's bond ratings, which are sort of like the state's credit ratings, except instead of a FICO report, we get a rating from the three major rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch on the state's bonds. We oversee sort of the state's cash accounts and cash balances. We process checks, reconciliation of payroll vendor checks, those kinds of things. Just some numbers that sort of show you the order of magnitude of what we handle. We have, for the past couple of years, had over $2 billion in short-term cash holdings in the state coffers. That number is slowly going down as we see a large influx of federal funds get spent down. But we also, that represents also over 8 billion of inflows and outflows over the course of the year. That number sort of coincides with the amount of the state budget, money coming in and out over the course of the year. We invest those short-term cash holdings and we generate interest income. That was $109 million in fiscal year 24. And the one thing I also wanted to note here is that the CDAC recommendation, which is that net tax supported debt authorization limit, is recommended to be $100 million for this biennium. So that's $50 million for each year of the capital bill that the Corrections and Institutions Committee is working on building. In retirement operations, I mentioned we have the public retirement programs for the state employees, the teachers, and the municipal employees. That amounts to over 50,000 active members and retirees. In 2022, we did the large amount of pension reforms in Act 114 that amounted to $5.8 billion in savings over time. The pension systems, I think particularly the state and teachers, have been under scrutiny in recent years for their funding struggles, but right now the story is really good. Interest rates of return over the past couple of years have been really positive. We have been continuing to fund the ADAC plus amount as articulated in Act 114, and both plans are on track to be fully funded by 2038. And so substantial progress has been made in those categories. I think the refrain from our office this year is just to stay the course, especially amidst sort of all of the other policy challenges that y'all are facing in the building this year. Pensions are in good shape. A lot of good work has been done on them in recent years.
Michael has a question.
Has there been any impact from, has there been any impact from the interim educators interim educator program, which allows retired teachers to teach?
So, we instituted that program a couple of years ago, and I think that what we've seen is that it's a relatively small amount of teachers who are taking advantage of that program, and so not enough to really move the needle in one way or another for the overall health of the pension systems. But I know that the Superintendents Association really worked hard with our office to get that program into place a couple of years ago, and that for the teachers who have been able to do it in particular circumstances in districts, it's been incredibly helpful as they face labor shortages. So yeah, I could get you more specific numbers on that if you're interested.
I'm gonna need it eventually.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks for being here. A couple of years ago, I think it was, there was an effort to move retired employees, state and teachers, I think, over to Medicare Advantage plans.
Mhm.
And that effort, I think the legislature was pretty clear that they weren't happy with that. I was wondering whether you have any word on, whether that remains the status quo, I guess.
Sure. So I know that prior to that bill being introduced, there were some changes made on the teacher side. And then the bill that you're talking about pertains specifically to the state side of things.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah. And it's my understanding that the status quo has been the status quo on the state side, and that the teacher side seems to be working well. If you're interested in doing a deep dive, we could get our director of retirement systems in here to talk about it, or get you, some time with him to ask specific questions. But I've not heard a lot happening in that space, which tells me that no news is good news from where I sit in the office usually.
I didn't need any more detail, just wanted to know that things were kind of status quo. Thank you.
Okay, so included in my presentation are these sort of fun charts which show sort of the bottom of the trough of where we were with the pension systems in 2020 and the projection of good progress that we anticipate in the coming years. So, more time can be spent looking at these later, but these are kind of fun. You can see the progress happening in real time, and it's quite satisfying. I'll talk more about unclaimed property because that topic really falls within the purview of this committee. And as I mentioned, a number of years ago, we revised the entire state unclaimed property statute with the help of this committee. And Treasurer Pichek has made it a significant priority to sort of infuse a lot of enthusiasm in this program and try to return as much money back to Vermonters as we can. And so a couple of stats. In FY 2024, we paid back a record number of claims, over 19,000 claims, totaling almost $6 million. In the first half of FY 25, we were over 17,000 claims paid back. And so we are on track to blow last year's record out of the water. Last year, we also took in a property over $18 million. And so our total holdings are over $130 million now. In order to try to
Stop you. Good.
Yes.
Okay, we had a little.
Oh. Okay.
Reset, and I just wanted to make sure that we're so good.
Sure, no problem. We've done sort of a couple of innovative things in the unclaimed property space this year that I think are good to highlight. We partnered with the Secretary of State's office and their corporations division to do kind of a pilot program where we matched information about nonprofits in Vermont that they had in their system to properties that we had in our system that belonged to nonprofits, and we were able to return over $150,000 with that pilot program. We did sort of a similar program with the tax department right before the holidays. You probably saw in the news the Treasurer's Money Back pilot program, where we matched information that the tax department was able to share about individuals in Vermont with information that we had in our system. And we were able to send checks directly to folks without them even having to file a claim, which was great. I mean, how exciting is it right before the holidays to get a check in the mail with money that you didn't know you were missing? But I do have two plugs for this program in my presentation today. The first is that we are requesting 2 new positions in the budget to support the ongoing and innovative work in the unclaimed property space. The great thing about the unclaimed property program is that it's self-sustaining. We fund the program with a percentage of the monies that come in on a year-over-year basis. And so this position request doesn't have any general fund dollars. It's all unclaimed property special funds. So you'll probably see that in the budget when it comes to you. We also are doing a campaign in February, which is National Unclaimed Property Month, to try to give back $1 million this month. And so one way that we're hoping to do that is to solicit the help of you all. We can provide lists of unclaimed properties that belong to members in your districts that you can take to town meeting home with you if you would like, or you can simply talk about unclaimed property in your weekly newsletters. Anything that you can do to help sort of leverage this for your constituents is a huge help. I think that there'll be specific communications coming from the treasurer himself to you all and sort of the legislative listserv with more information on that. But if you would specifically like a list for a town meeting for your district, you can get in touch with me. I can get that to you, and my contact information is at the end of the slide deck.
Can you categorize, shall we say, the largest sources of where this unclaimed money is coming from?
Sure. It's all kinds, really.
Right.
There's forgotten life insurance policies, lost bank accounts, uncashed checks for different reasons. I can share some personal examples that I think are helpful. I had unclaimed property at one point that was from a cable service from an old apartment where it had been prorated for the month when I canceled it. And they didn't know where to send the remaining amount. And so it got escheated to the state. My husband had unclaimed property at one point, and it was old dining dollars from his law school. So it can come from anywhere. And sometimes it's like a business that's been dissolved, and there are a lot of accounts, or an estate where there was an account that whoever was the executor of the state maybe didn't know about, and it eventually got escheated to the state. So it can come from all different sources.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Clarifying on that, so at what point does the unclaimed property revert to the general fund?
So it's not necessarily that individual properties revert from the general fund. Annually, there's a percentage of the amount of unclaimed property that we take in that comes for a general fund transfer. And that's based on a calculation of how much we need to administer the program and how much we anticipate paying out in any given year. Folks never lose the right to claim your property. It's always perpetual. But we don't have sort of all $130 million of it sitting in a bank account. It is kind of like if all 130 million were to be claimed today, we would have to go to the general fund and try to figure out how to pay that out. So the amount that comes to the general fund is sort of like an accounting trick each year based on a projection calculation that we do. Yeah, and you will see in the BAA, which you may or may not have been asked to sign on yet, there's a $4.4 million increase in the general fund transfer for unclaimed property over last year. And that's simply just because of the timing of the receipts. We get most of the properties issued to the state in May, which is just late in the budget building process. And so we usually have a true up in the BAA. And those true ups are just kind of getting larger year over year because the amount of money that we're taking in is larger year over year. Sometimes I get questions about why is so much more money getting issued to the state now than in years past? And I think there are a couple of explanations for that. First is that there's just a greater variety of the types of financial property that exist because we have all of these electronic accounts for different things. The second is just inflation, right? Like if 10 years ago we were getting $3 million a year, the same amount of money now is a greater number. So that's sort of why. Pretty simple explanation.
Is there a threshold on these assets? Like if I have a bank account with $3, I mean, you hold this for hundreds of years?
We do. It belongs to you rightfully. Interestingly, it costs us a few dollars to cut a check. So sometimes for the property, it costs us more to cut the check than the property is worth. But what we find also is that some of those really small properties, while we encourage people to claim them, they never end up getting claimed. And so they just sort of operate like on the bottom line of the fund, which allows us to keep the program self-sustaining. We also have a significant number of unclaimed properties that get issued to the state that are like unknown or for just a few cents. Same thing, like we keep all of those just in the fund and we try to figure out who they belong to. And we would never say, no, you can't claim this because it's only for 2 cents. But what those properties end up doing is sort of acting as a cushion that allows us to continue to operate the program.
Do you have a question, Michael?
I can state that it's a pretty simple process. I've had to go through it and for like $3.
Yes.
It was, I mean, you have to get a notarized signature, at least when I did it. I don't know.
It really depends. The claims process is different based on what type of property it is. So for example, like when I had my piece of unclaimed property, it was really easy to show that I had lived at this apartment and had paid Comcast, whatever, and that it belonged to me, right? If I had a piece of unclaimed property, hypothetically, that was from an estate, and both my brother and I were the descendants, then it would be a little bit more complicated. In those cases, we require a death certificate, signatories of everyone that's eligible to claim it, sometimes an obituary, things like that. And so it's a constant balance between wanting to make it as easy as possible for people to get the money back in their hands while also reducing fraud risk. Unclaimed property across the country has been an area that's been ripe for fraudulent activity in recent years. And so, it's a balance. But yeah, I'm glad that it was pretty simple for you. Okay. Now I'm going to sort of get into some of the more programmatic aspects of the treasurer's office, less related to the work of our standalone departments. You've probably heard Treasurer Pieciak discuss the 10% in Vermont, or the local investment program. This is the program whereby the treasurer has the authority to invest up to 10% of the state's average daily cash balance in local projects. Last year, we added an additional 2.5% credit facility for climate infrastructure resilience projects. And so now the total for the sort of local investment program is up to 12.5%. We have prioritized housing investments and climate infrastructure investments over the past couple of years, and have been really excited about some of the projects that we've been able to get moving through these investments. I link here the full report if anyone is interested in sort of all of the particulars about the projects that we've done since Treasurer Pieciak has been in office. But this is an innovative program that I know that he's really pleased to have brought online.
Could you explain maybe just briefly what the process is for applying for the, I assume it's a grant application of some sort? What the criteria are? How do you choose?
Sure. So we did, when Treasurer Pieciak came into office, he kind of revamped the program. We've been doing sort of slightly longer maturities. There's been a specific focus on housing. And we used to only have an average cash balance of $300 to $400 million daily. Now we're closer to $2 billion. And so when Treasurer Pieciak came in, we realized that there was additional lending capacity in this space. It's all loans, it's not grants. All of the money has to be repaid back to the state, but we do lend at favorable interest rates in order to promote economic development. At the beginning of what was last year? Yeah, so 2023, we did a solicitation for proposals. We collected solicitations throughout the spring, and we evaluated them first as staff, where we assigned different criteria, whether or not it met the investment priorities, sort of the financial health of the proposed project. It's helpful for our staff and workload if there's an intermediary that works alongside the project, whether it's the bond bank or VHFA or VITA. We've also done some work in Rutland with Heritage Family Credit Union. We've done a project in Winooski with, I believe, Eastrise Credit Union. And so there are those kinds of factors. And then we also look at just the overall portfolio. So there's not, the criteria is fluid because we want to make sure that as state investments, we don't have things like concentration risk. We want to make sure that our portfolio of maturities is balanced and things like that. And so there's individual project by project merits, but then there's also how everything pieces together for the portfolio of investments. We are getting ready and hoping to this spring do another solicitation for another round of proposals, and we will highly publicize that at the time. But usually the application consists of a cover letter, a statement of financials, and then we have meetings with staff to kind of vet each project as well. There's a LIAC committee meeting where there's an evaluation, and then we go from there.
Thank you.
These long-term instruments, or is this just startup capital, or?
So it depends. We have some things in the portfolio that are, we are doing some bridge money with the bond bank and that 2.5% credit facility to provide loans to municipalities as they await FEMA reimbursements from the floods in 2023 and 2024. And we're looking at those as much shorter term maturities. Some of the housing investments that we've made are 20, 30 years. We have some business investments with VITA, which are 10 years. So it really depends on the nature of the project. I think that for future investments, we are hoping for shorter maturities than what we sort of did in the round for the past 2 years. But it depends on the nature of the project, and you can always pay back early. We're happy to take your money back early.
Follow-up. So if it's a longer term instrument, is that 10% cap a hard cap, or and that long-term instrument, it's out of it until it's done, and that extra money is all it's available? Is that how that works? Or
That's right. So the percentage cap is in statute, so we can't exceed that.
okay.
If we do loan for a longer maturity, it does mean that it's out of our coffers for a longer time, but it is amortizing. And so there are a few loans that we made in the very early days of this program under Treasurer Pierce, where there were balloon payments at the end, but everything that we've been doing lately has been amortizing. So it's not out for the entire duration of 30 years. There's always a portion of money that's coming back in, and there are some shorter maturities. And so when I talk about sort of the piece of the puzzle to balance it, I think that's where we just try to make sure that the portfolio is still serving Vermonters. I think also when we look at an investment opportunity that is of a longer maturity, we really want to look at what the economic benefit is going to be. How many brand new housing units is this going to create? Is it worth the risk? And so those are questions that the treasurer contemplates, that the LIAC committee members contemplate before they make the investment.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the next. I skipped this slide, but this is perhaps the most important slide for this committee, so not to be overlooked. I have good news. The Vermont Saves program, which is the public retirement program for businesses in the state who don't currently offer a retirement plan to their employees, was officially launched at the end of last year. It already has folks that are enrolled and assets are accumulating. It's very new, and so I don't have a lot of real numbers to report, but I do know that the average savings rate for the employees that elect to stay in the program is over 4%, which is wonderful because they can start as low as 1%. And so the fact that we have an average savings rate that is well above that is incredibly positive. I think we're also getting some anecdotal data that there are a lot of younger folks that are choosing to remain enrolled in the program in their 20s and 30s that didn't previously have access to a retirement plan. So, a decent savings rate at an early age with the opportunity to compound. I think that there's a lot of potential for, some real asset accumulation for those individuals with this plan.
So I know that for the company that I work for, they allow incremental increases and it's set. Like you put it in and then you forget about it and it incrementally increases, which is really good for people like me who's not good at planning.
Yeah.
You have that option in there.
So
You don't, you should.
So we have some language that's going to be coming to the committee, that some tweaks. We'd like to have the increments, the allowable increments, go up to 8% in the program. That said, those are sort of automatic increases, but at any time, an individual is able to elect to be as low as 1%. And so what the language proposes is just to set the default a little bit higher. And that's largely based on feedback that we've received from other states, feedback from participants, and just the general idea that saving more is better. And so I think yeah, if you are the kind of person that is super psyched to just be enrolled, to set it and forget it, there are a lot of good variables at play in this program that will work for you to get you there. If you like to sort of micromanage it a little bit more, or you're concerned that 8% is really just too much to take out of your paycheck at this time to save for retirement, and you need to just start smaller, you can do that as well. And the online platform is super intuitive and easy to use.
I trust that that's available for like self-employed. Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Yep. It's not mandatory for self-employed individuals, but it is available to them. Sure. It functions it's post-tax, so it functions as a Roth IRA.
You said it's primarily, well, for people who work for businesses that do not have a company one. What if there's a company one, but say you're part-time, you're just starting out? And say your parents are trying to encourage you to develop
Yeah.
this habit.
Yeah.
And so otherwise you wouldn't qualify for it because you're just part-time status or whatever reason. They participate in this instead, or?
It becomes a little bit tricky because you have to enroll through your employer. However, nothing about Vermont Saves precludes that individual from opening their own Roth IRA at any Vermont financial institution or national financial institution, but I'll put a plug in for the Vermont ones. And it's really the same product. I think the difference with Vermont Saves is that the state is sort of vetting the investment lineup, vetting the third party administrator, et cetera. There are advantages there, making sure that the fees are good. But as far as the definition of a Roth IRA, nothing precludes them from doing that. And perhaps some of the educational resources that we have on the site could be helpful. Yeah, it's always good. You can have them watch my testimony. It's save early. It's really beneficial. We were also in committee a lot last year talking about the baby bonds program. We did get authorization language passed for a pilot project. It did not come with any funds, but we did a lot of work over the summer and over fall with a group of Middlebury College students to start to research some of the topics that the committee asked us to dig more into. And the pilot program is intended to be funded with philanthropic funds. We're working on sort of establishing some relationships to find a philanthropic source for that program. We submitted a report to the legislature under separate cover that sort of details the progress on baby bonds. If you're interested, it's on the legislative website. The other program that I just want to highlight here is the Vermont ABLE program, which continues to be incredibly successful in Vermont. At this point, we have over $12 million in assets under that program and almost 1,200 account participants. Vermont ABLE accounts are tax advantage investment accounts for individuals with disabilities, and money invested in these accounts does not affect a person's eligibility for other disability-related benefits that they might qualify for. And so in 2017, when Vermont set up this program, it was quite innovative. At the time, there still is a $2,000 asset limit for folks on Medicaid, et cetera, or in Social Security disability. And so service providers were having to advise individuals to spend down money in their accounts below the $2,000 asset limit in any given month so that they wouldn't jeopardize their benefits eligibility. And so when I think about the $12 million that we've been able to accrue in ABLE accounts, and of course, all of the inflows and outflows in those accounts over the past almost 8 years now, it's really incredible that money is being put to work thoughtfully in the lives of these individuals and being spent on different qualified expenses instead of maybe having to be spent in other ways that are not as constructive. So really excited about that program. And this weekend, Treasurer Petrak is going to be doing the Penguin Plunge in Burlington. to support the Special Olympics and to raise awareness about the ABLE program. So be sure to catch that.
Yeah, just so I understand, so does the ABLE program have a limit to, or does it exceed the $2,000 or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So there is an annual contribution limit. It is, I think it's close to $16,000 or more now. It goes up every year with inflation. And the annual contribution limit is even more if you're contributing wages in addition. There's a lifetime limit of, I think, $435,000, or it actually might be approaching $500,000 now with the inflationary adjustments. And I mean, the average account balance in Vermont is still right around $10,000. And so we're not really seeing people approach those limits. Most people use it as more of a checking account, but it can be used as a sort of investment account for the future, like a retirement account or an estate planning tool.
And it doesn't mess with their eligibility for any other programs?
That's correct. There is one tricky caveat for housing, where if you take in money for housing in 1 month, it has to be spent in the same calendar month. And that's just sort of tricky, but we have particulars that explain that nuance on the Vermont ABLE website. You're welcome.
It also enables people with disabilities to be able to actually get a job and earn wages that they couldn't do before because of that $2,000 maximum limit on what they could bring in. And it also allows family members to be able to contribute money to those accounts as well. So it's really opened up a lot for people with disabilities in Vermont.
Yeah, I hear incredible stories every day about the uses of this program, and it's very exciting. I remember during the pandemic when everyone was receiving the sort of federal stimulus checks, individuals with disabilities were panicking about what they were going to do when they received those checks because they couldn't cash them. Otherwise, they could jeopardize their other benefits. And so we had a huge surge in the number of ABLE account enrollees because it worked as a tool that they could actually cash this check. It's just one of those things where I think it's not always thought through, how we're going to support people. And also $2,000. I mean, when we think about how much rent costs in Vermont or how much your heating bill is, I mean, $2,000 at any given time in your checking account with your monthly inflows and outflows, it could really be hard to manage to that number with how expensive it is to live.
What age do they have to sign up for?
So the onset of your disability has to be before the age of 26. However, that's hopefully going to increase to 46 in a couple of years. But we shall see. That change is, we have to rely on the federal government for that change. And I'm not sure, I don't know. That's all I can say. So that concludes sort of the overview presentation that I wanted to get. This is my contact information. If you ever have any questions about work that the treasurer's office does, you can contact me here. I think the two sort of legislative things I wanted to preview for the committee today are the unclaimed property positions, a few changes coming to the Vermont Save statute to tweak it, and also the treasurer's medical debt initiative, which I didn't put on these slides, but I know has been in the press and you've received emails and lots of information about. We are hoping for $1 million appropriation this year for the medical debt relief. Happy to answer any other questions before.
Where is that language or who's?
So medical debt is in its own bill. Yeah. And the unclaimed property positions will be requested in our budget. And then the Vermont Saves language, I think, I'm not sure. I had the flu all last week, and so some vehicles I thought good for that. We may present that in the budget as well, as a budget request as well. Things are moving really quickly in the building this year. So, yeah, but I do have it and I can share it with you. I'm just not sure where it goes yet. There's one other change I think that might come to you, but in the BAA, we have requested that Becky Wasserman's official title change from Director of Vermont Safe to Director of Economic Empowerment. There's no monetary change associated with that, but HR has told us that we need a statutory change to change her title. So hopefully everything from our office is simple this year. Like I said, we did pensions a couple of years ago, and so hopefully it's simple.
Any discussions on the baby bonds?
We've had some discussions about an administrative appropriation for the pilot program. I think we're still discussing what that amount might be that we would request and trying to think of what a good source of funds would be for that. But it is pretty clear that even if we're able to secure philanthropic donation, we would need some additional funds to support the administration of it. And we did do some research over the course of the summer that's presented in the report, but that's sort of the status update now. Pilot's not live yet.
We held off on introductions because it was a very snowy morning, so I don't know if you'd like us to introduce ourselves so that we could.
Sure, that'd be wonderful. There are a lot of new faces too, so that'd be great.
Jonathan Cooper.
Hey, I'm the Paris Ranger representing Deerfield Valley, Wilmington, Renegade, Halifax.
Hi, Herb Olson. I represent Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, and Starksville.
Edie Granning, Jericho and Underhill, and the Vice Chair of the committee.
And Mike Markout from Coventry, represent Coventry, Artisburg, Newport Town, Troy, J, Westfield, Lowell, Eden, and Chair of the committee.
Kirk White, Bethel, Rochester, Stockbridge, and Hancock, ranking member.
Tony Priestley, Bradford, Fairleigh Street.
Michael Booton, Berry City.
Tony Miklas representing Milton and a little bit of Georgia.
Dave Bosch from Clarendon, representing Wallingford, Clarendon, West Rutland, and the bulk of Rutland town.
Nice to see everyone on this snowy morning.
Who's our committee assistant?
Yes, we've had the pleasure of corresponding quite a bit so far this session.
Excellent, thank you. I'm sure we'll review and treasure and again, as things proceed through the budget and any language that we need to take a look at.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing my screen. I know that Treasurer Pichek was disappointed he hasn't been able to come in, or that he wasn't able to come in for the introductory testimony, but I'm sure you'll see him soon.
Good.
Thank
Thank you. So committee, we're on at 10, back here at 1. Afternoon, we'll hear from the state archivist and Lottery, and then we'll have a little bit more testimony on H99. We'll have the committee discussion after that, after what we hear on 99, to see where the committee wants to proceed. So let's be sure that we guys, if they're not in the room by 5 of, that we're on our way to the floor. We can get another good start. Any questions? Hope everybody had a good ride in. Was tricky, I guess, here and there.
I was trying for change.
My GPS redirected me all around the United States.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was going north like this accident.
Yeah.
And no.
It was a nice short trip for me. Okay.